Isabella Izzy Diaz always knew Tuesdays were the worst days for bad news. It was a silly superstition, born of a string of painful coincidences over the years, but it had taken root in her mind as an irrefutable truth. So, when the phone rang, that Tuesday in March, as she finished reviewing a piece on municipal corruption at her small desk in the newspaper office, her stomach clenched before she even answered. Isabella Martinez? The voice on the other end had an accent she couldn't immediately place, but it sounded familiarly distant and unsettling. Yes, who's this? She pressed the receiver to her ear, trying to filter out the constant clatter of the newsroom around her. My name is Hamid Ben Ali. I'm a fisherman in Essaouira, Morocco. I found something that I believe belongs to your family. The world seemed to slow around Isabella. Essaouira, Morocco. The words echoed in her mind like stones thrown into a deep well, stirring echoes she had tried to silence for nearly 2 decades. Her hands began to tremble, and she had to brace herself against the desk to keep from collapsing. What are you talking about? Her voice came out harsher than she intended. A leather suitcase, old, with women's clothes and photographs. One of them has the name Sofia Martinez written on the back. And there's a diary. Sofia. The name sliced through Isabella's chest like a cold blade. She closed her eyes, and for a moment she could see her sister's face with perfect clarity. The bright brown eyes, always full of life and curiosity. The crooked smile she wore when she was planning some adventure. Sofia, who had vanished without a trace in 1997, when she was only 23. Where did you find it? Isabella whispered, her voice barely audible. In my fishing nets 3 days ago. But listen, Senora Martinez, that's not all. What's written in the diary, I think your sister may have tried to leave a message. Isabella felt the air leave her lungs. For all these years, she had clung to the hope that Sofia was alive somewhere, perhaps with amnesia, perhaps having chosen a different life. The official story had always been that the boat had sunk during a storm, that the bodies were never found because the sea had taken them. But she had never fully believed it. There was something about Laurent Dumas, the mysterious Frenchman with whom Sofia had left, that had always bothered her. He had appeared in her sister's life like a hurricane, sweeping her away with promises of adventure and romance. And then they had both simply disappeared. I need to see it, Isabella said, her voice gaining firmness. Can I come there? Senora, I think it would be better. But I need to warn you about something. Since I found this suitcase, strange people have been appearing in the village asking questions. Last night, someone broke into my house. A shiver ran down Isabella's spine. Are you all right? I am, but I'm hiding at my brother's house. I brought the suitcase with me, but Senora Martinez, I think whoever harmed your sister is still out there, and they don't want this to come to light. Isabella hung up the phone, her hands trembling. Around her, the newsroom continued its normal frenetic pace, but she felt completely disconnected from that world. It was as if a door that had remained locked for 19 years had been suddenly thrown open, releasing all the ghosts she had tried to keep buried. She looked at the framed photo on her desk, the only picture she had of herself and Sofia together as adults. It had been taken a few months before the disappearance, during Isabella's 21st birthday. Sofia was radiant, wearing a silver necklace with a crescent moon pendant that she never took off. It was a gift from their grandmother, an heirloom, that had been passed down from mother to daughter for generations. Izzy, you okay? Marcus, her editor, pulled her from her thoughts. He stood beside her desk, his face creased with concern. I need a leave, she said, still looking at the photograph. Something came up about my sister. Marcus knew the story of Sofia. He had been one of the few who hadn't discouraged her when she decided to become an investigative journalist, partly motivated by the hope that her skills would one day help her uncover the truth about her sister's disappearance. How many days do you need? I don't know. Maybe weeks. I need to go to Morocco. Marcus nodded without hesitation. Go. And if you need anything, call me. 3 days later, Isabella was on a plane bound for Casablanca, carrying only a small suitcase and a backpack full of copies of all the documents related to Sophia's disappearance that she had collected over the years. During the flight, she tried to mentally prepare herself for what she might find, but her mind kept returning to the last conversations she had had with her sister. Sophia had called 2 weeks before disappearing, talking about Laurent with a passion that bordered on obsession. "He's unlike any man I've ever known, Izzy," she had said, her voice full of excitement. "It's like he sees parts of me that I didn't even know existed. We're going on an incredible trip along the Moroccan coast. He has a boat, and he knows secret places that tourists never see." "Be careful, Sophie," Isabella had replied, an inexplicable unease settling in her chest. "You barely know this man. Sometimes you know a person your whole life and never really know them. And sometimes you meet someone and you know immediately that they're your destiny. Laurent is my destiny, Izzy. I feel it." Those were the last words Isabella heard from her sister. Casablanca Airport was a chaotic blend of sounds, smells, and movement that instantly transported her back to that terrible time when she had first flown here, 2 weeks after the disappearance, desperate to search for Sophia in person. At the time, the Moroccan authorities had been polite but firm. Without evidence of a crime, without bodies, there wasn't much they could do besides file the case as a maritime accident. But now, there was evidence. There was the suitcase, the diary, the message Sophia had left. Isabella felt a mixture of hope and terror settling in her chest as she hailed a taxi to Essaouira. The journey would take almost 3 hours, more than enough time for her mind to conjure 1,000 different scenarios about what she might find. The Moroccan landscape unfurled outside the taxi window like a slow-motion film. The Atlas Mountains rose in the distance, majestic and indifferent, while small adobe villages dotted the road. Isabella tried to focus on the austere beauty of the scenery, but her thoughts kept returning to Sophia and the circumstances of her disappearance. Laurent Dumas. Even after all these years, the name still made her shudder. She had tried to investigate him at the time, but had only found superficial information. He claimed to be a businessman, held a French passport, and had rented a house in Marrakech for a few months. Beyond that, nothing. It was as if he hadn't existed before 1997 and ceased to exist afterward. No family to claim him, no friends to ask after him, no business that missed him. The sun was setting when they finally arrived in Essaouira. The coastal city stretched before her like a jewel nestled between the Atlantic Ocean and the desert dunes. The ancient walls gleamed with a golden light, and the distant sound of the waves mingled with the call to prayer echoing from the minarets scattered throughout the city. Hamid Ben Ali had arranged to meet her at a small cafe in the heart of the Medina. Isabella recognized him immediately from his description on the phone, a middle-aged man with graying hair, hands marked by years of working at sea. He was sitting at a table in the corner, a nervous expression on his face, constantly looking around as if expecting some danger. "Senora Martinez?" He stood up as she approached, extending a calloused hand. His eyes were kind, but she could see fear in them. "Thank you for calling me," Isabella said, shaking his hand. "Where's the suitcase?" Hamid looked around once more before answering. "In a safe place. But first, I need to tell you exactly how I found it. And I need you to understand the danger we're in by getting involved in this." They sat down, and Hamid ordered mint tea for both of them. His hands trembled slightly as he began to speak. I've been fishing for 40 years, Senora. I know these waters like I know my wife's face, but I've never seen anything like that suitcase. It was caught in my nets in a strange way, as if it had been deliberately tied up so that someone would eventually find it. Isabella felt a shiver. What do you mean? The suitcase was bound with ropes, but not ropes that would have been used on a boat. They were new, synthetic ropes, and it was heavy, not just from what was inside, but because it had stones tied to it. Someone wanted it to sink, but at the same time, they wanted it to be found if necessary. You think, Sophia? I think your sister knew she was in danger, and she found a way to leave a message, even if it took years to be discovered. Hamid pulled a stack of photographs from his pocket and placed them on the table. Isabella recognized Sophia immediately in the first photo, younger, smiling next to a tall, dark-haired man she assumed was Laurent. But there was something in her sister's eyes, something she hadn't noticed in the other photos she'd seen of Sophia with Laurent. It was a subtle shadow, an almost imperceptible tension. There's more, Hamid said, lowering his voice. The clothes. In the suitcase, some have strange marks, stains that look like blood. Isabella's stomach churned. Did you show this to the authorities? I did, but after I did, strange things started to happen. At first, it was just questions. People showed up in the village saying they were journalists, wanting to know about the suitcase, but they didn't look like real journalists. They asked the wrong questions. They were interested in the wrong details. What kind of details? They wanted to know if there was anything else in the sea, if I'd found other things over the years. And they specifically asked about abandoned houses on the coast, places where someone could have hidden out for a while. Isabella felt her heart quicken. And there are abandoned houses? Hamid nodded slowly. There's one, about 20 kilometers north of here, an old stone house that belonged to a French family. It's been abandoned for years after the owner died. But recently, some locals said they'd seen lights there at night. Recently, when? In the last 2 weeks since I found the suitcase. A tense silence settled between them. Isabella could feel the pieces of a terrible puzzle starting to fit together in her mind, forming a picture she wasn't sure she wanted to see completely. Hamid, she said finally, I need to see that house. He shook his head vigorously. It's dangerous, Senora. Whoever's doing this, they're watching. Last night, when I got back home after talking to a friend about the suitcase, I found my door broken into. They didn't take anything of value, but they went through everything. It was like they were looking for something specific. Or sending a message. Exactly. Isabella looked at the photographs again, focusing on Laurent's face. Something about him bothered her, something beyond the obvious physical attraction he clearly held over Sophie. It was the way he looked at the camera, as if he knew exactly the effect he was having and was enjoying it. Hamid, I know it's dangerous, but my sister has been missing for 19 years. If there's any chance of finding out what really happened to her, I need to take this risk. Hamid studied her face for a long moment, then sighed. All right, but we do this my way, and if I say run, we run, no questions asked. They agreed to meet the following morning. Hamid would retrieve the suitcase from his hiding place and then take her to see the abandoned house. Isabella spent the night in a small hotel in the Medina, but she barely slept. Every sound in the street, every door slam, every raised voice in the hallway sent her heart racing. Around 3 in the morning, she gave up trying to sleep and went to the window. The old city stretched before her, silent under the moonlight. Somewhere out there were the answers she'd been searching for almost 2 decades. But for the first time since she'd received Hamid's call, she wondered if she really wanted to know those answers. Morning arrived shrouded in a thin mist that softened the city's outlines. Isabella found Hamid at the same cafe as the night before, but this time he carried a faded canvas backpack. His eyes were red, as if he hadn't slept either. "The suitcase is here," he said, touching the backpack. "But first, Senora Martinez, I need to show you something I found last night." He pulled a yellowed envelope from his pocket. It was hidden in the suitcase lining. I only discovered it when I examined it more carefully. Isabella took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in handwriting she would recognize anywhere. Sophia's script, usually so elegant and controlled, but here, rushed and shaky. "If anyone finds this," the message read, "know that Laurent is not who he says he is. His real name is Lucien Moreau, and he's done this before. There are other women. He showed me pictures of them, said they were his special collection. I managed to find a way out, but I don't know if I'll get far. The house I'm in is at kilometer 47 of the North Coastal Road. If anything happens to me, please look for the others. Don't let him keep doing this." Sophia Martinez, June 1997. Tears blurred Isabella's vision. It was her sister's voice, coming from beyond time, carrying not only fear, but also a desperate courage. Sophia had tried to save herself and also warn about other victims. "Kilometer 47, Hamid said softly. "That's where the abandoned house I mentioned yesterday is." Isabella carefully folded the letter and put it in her pocket. "Then that's where we're going." The trip to the house took 40 minutes along a narrow road that wound between hills covered in thorny vegetation. Hamid drove an old jeep, occasionally stopping to check if they were being followed. The tension in the air was palpable, and Isabella sensed that they were both extremely alert to any sign of danger. The house appeared suddenly around a bend, standing solitary against the grey sky. It was a two-story stone structure with narrow windows and a medieval look that made it seem more like a fortress than a residence. Ivy had covered much of the walls, and some windows were broken, but the structure seemed solid. "There," Hamid pointed to a small barn at the back of the property. "That's where I saw the lights." They parked at a safe distance and approached on foot. Isabella could feel her heart beating so loudly that she was sure Hamid could hear it. The house seemed deserted, but there was something about it that radiated a sense of unease, as if the stones themselves held painful memories. The front door was unlocked, swinging slightly in the ocean breeze. Hamid went in first, and Isabella followed, treading carefully on the tiles covered in dust and dry leaves. The interior of the house was even darker than she had imagined. The furniture was covered with dusty sheets, and there was a musty, closed-in smell that made her eyes water. But there was something else, an underlying odor she couldn't identify, but that made her want to run. "This way," Hamid whispered, pointing to a staircase leading to the second floor. They climbed slowly, each step groaning under their feet. The second-floor hallway was narrow and dark, with several doors on either side. The first door they opened revealed an empty room, with only a rusty iron bed and a broken window where the wind blew freely. The second room was different. The windows had been boarded up, and there were clear signs that someone had lived there recently. A pile of old magazines was stacked in a corner, and there were empty food cans scattered on the floor. But it was in the third room that they found what made them freeze in horror. The walls were covered in photographs, dozens of them, showing young, beautiful women, all smiling at the camera, next to the same dark-haired man Isabella had seen in the photos with Sophia. But there was something disturbing about the images. The women seemed progressively thinner and paler as the photos progressed chronologically. And in the center of the wall, like a macabre centerpiece, was an enlarged photograph of Sophia. "My God," Hamid whispered. Isabella approached the wall, her legs trembling. Besides the photographs, there were newspaper clippings from different countries, all reporting the disappearances of young women. France, Spain, Italy, Morocco. All the women were described as having embarked on romantic trips with charming men who then vanished without a trace. "How many?" Isabella asked, her voice barely audible. Hamid was counting the photos. 17. No, 18. Sophie was the last. A slightly open drawer caught Isabella's attention. Inside, she found something that made her shudder. A silver necklace with a crescent moon pendant, the necklace Sophie always wore, her grandmother's heirloom. But that wasn't all that shocked her. Along with the necklace were other personal belongings, earrings, rings, bracelets, a macabre collection of mementos from all the women who had disappeared. He was killing them, Isabella whispered, the realization hitting her like a punch, one by one, and keeping trophies. That's when they heard the sound of an approaching engine. Hamid ran to the window and peered through a crack between the boards. A black car, 2 men, they found us. Panic seized Isabella's chest. "Is there a back exit?" "Yes, but we'll have to leave the jeep." They raced downstairs, Isabella still clutching Sophie's necklace. Through the kitchen window, she could see 2 figures approaching the house, moving with the deliberate precision of people accustomed to violence. Hamid guided her through the back door and across the overgrown yard. Behind the house was a small copse of trees that offered cover, but Isabella knew they couldn't run for long. The men seemed to know the area too well to be mere opportunists. "Why do they want to stop us from uncovering the truth?" Isabella asked as they hid behind a large oak tree. "Because Lucien, whatever his real name is, he's still alive," Hamid replied, "and he still has protection. Powerful people who don't want his crimes to come to light." That's when Isabella heard something that made her freeze. A sound she knew well, a sound she'd heard in nightmares for 19 years, Laurent Dumas or Lucien Moreau's voice calling her name. "Isabella Martinez." The voice echoed through the woods, carrying the same seductive charm that had captivated Sophie all those years ago. "I know you're there. You don't need to be afraid. I just want to talk about your sister." The blood in Isabella's veins turned to ice. The voice calling to her through the trees was exactly as she remembered. Smooth, cultured, with just a slight French accent that made it even more captivating. It was the voice of the man who had taken her sister away, never to return. And now he was there, a few feet away, as if the 19 years between them meant nothing. Hamid grabbed her arm, his eyes wide with terror. "Don't answer," he whispered. "It's a trap." But something inside Isabella had shifted the moment she heard that voice. The fear she'd felt moments before transformed into a cold, calculated rage. This man had destroyed her life, had taken Sophie, had done the same thing to 17 other women, and now had the audacity to speak to her as if it were a casual encounter. "Where is my sister?" Isabella shouted back, ignoring Hamid's desperate look. A low chuckle echoed through the woods. "Your sister was special, Isabella. May I call you Isabella? Sophie spoke of you so much. The younger sister who became a journalist, always trying to save the world. Answer my question!" Isabella's voice came out louder than she intended, and she could hear footsteps approaching through the undergrowth. "Sophie is, well, let's just say she found her peace, as did all the others. They all found what they were looking for in the end." Isabella felt her legs weaken. For all these years, even in the darkest moments, she had clung to the possibility that Sophie was still alive. But now, hearing those words spoken with such cruel casualness, the final reality settled in her heart like a cold stone. "Why?" she asked, and her voice cracked. "Why did you do this to them?" "Ah, Isabella, you really don't understand, do you? I didn't do anything to them. I liberated them. All these women, they were trapped in small, insignificant lives. I offered them adventure, passion, the chance to become part of something bigger than themselves." The footsteps were closer now, and through the leaves Isabella could glimpse a tall figure moving towards them. Hamid was pulling her hand. trying to get them to move deeper into the woods, but she seemed hypnotized by the proximity of the man who had haunted her nightmares for so long. "Sophie found out, didn't she?" Isabella continued, her voice gaining strength. "She found out about the other women. That's why you killed her." Sophie was too smart for her own good, Lucian admitted, and now Isabella could see him clearly through the trees. He had aged, of course, but he still possessed the aristocratic look that had captivated Sophie. Graying hair at the temples, piercing blue eyes, a smile that managed to be both charming and menacing at the same time. "She found my collection of mementos, became disturbed, tried to run, as you can imagine, and you stopped her. I did what was necessary. Sophie had become a problem, just as you have now." That's when Isabella noticed he wasn't alone. Two burly-looking men were flanking him, and she could see the glint of metal in their hands, weapons. Hamid finally got her moving, and they started running deeper into the copse. Behind them, she could hear Lucien barking orders in French, his voice rapidly losing its civilized tone and revealing something far more dangerous underneath. The copse was thick, thorny branches tearing at their clothes as they ran. Isabella could hear her pursuers closing in, snapping twigs and cursing in a variety of languages. Hamid seemed to know the area, guiding her through paths she didn't even know existed. "There's a fishing village about 2 kilometers from here," he gasped as they ran. "If we can make it there." A gunshot echoed through the trees, and splinters of bark flew from a trunk just beside Isabella's head. They weren't just trying to capture her, they were trying to kill her. "Isabella!" Lucien's voice echoed behind them, fainter now, but still clearly audible. "You can't run forever. I have resources you can't even imagine, important people protecting me." They burst into a clearing where a small stream cut through the terrain. Hamid stopped for a moment, looking around to get his bearings. "Why is he doing this?" Isabella asked, trying to catch her breath. "If he's already killed all these women, why does he care if we find out now?" "Because he never stopped," Hamid replied, a terrible understanding dawning in his eyes. "Senora Martinez, I think he's still at it. The lights we saw at the house, the men asking questions in the village. He's back because he has a new victim." The horror of the realization hit Isabella like a lightning bolt. "We have to tell the police. The police won't believe us without proof, and even if they did, he said he has protection. That means someone in the authorities is involved." Another gunshot echoed, this time closer. They took off, running again, following the stream in the hope that the water would mask their tracks. Isabella could feel her lungs burning, but adrenaline kept her moving. It was when they were almost out of the copse that Hamid stumbled. He fell heavily, crying out in pain and clutching his ankle. "Go," he said, gesturing for her to continue. "I can't run anymore. You need to get to the village." "I'm not leaving you," Isabella replied, trying to help him up. "You have to go. Someone needs to tell the truth about what happened here." The sounds of the pursuit were getting closer. Isabella could hear voices speaking French, coordinating a systematic search. Hamid pushed the backpack containing Sophie's suitcase into her hands. "Take this. It's the proof you need." Tears streaming down her face, Isabella grabbed the backpack and ran towards what she hoped was the village. Behind her, she heard Hamid shouting in Arabic, probably trying to divert the pursuer's attention away from the direction she had taken. A gunshot echoed through the copse, followed by silence. Isabella ran faster than she ever had in her life, tears streaming down her face. Hamid had died trying to help her, trying to bring justice for Sophie and all the other women Lucien had killed. She couldn't let that sacrifice be in vain. The fishing village appeared before her like a miracle. Small white houses clustered around a tiny harbor with fishing boats bobbing gently in the water. Isabella ran straight towards what looked like the most important building in the village, a small town hall with a Moroccan flag fluttering in front. "Help!" she shouted in Arabic, one of the few words she had learned. "Police! Police!" An elderly man emerged from the building, looking at her with concern. He spoke rudimentary French, and Isabella managed to quickly explain that there were armed men in the woods and that Hamid was injured or dead. The man made a few quick calls, and within 20 minutes, 2 police cars arrived at the village. Isabella told her story to the officer in charge, a serious middle-aged man named Captain Benkirain, showing him the photographs and the letter Sophie had left behind. "This man, Lucien Moreau," the captain said, studying the photos. "That's not the name he's using now." "What do you mean?" "We received a report 3 days ago about a Frenchman staying at a hotel in Essaouira. He was asking questions about young women, saying he was a photographer looking for models. The name on the passport was Philippe Dubois." Isabella felt a chill. He really was hunting a new victim. "Where is he now?" "We don't know. He checked out of the hotel last night and didn't return, but he left his things in the room." The captain organized a search of the abandoned house, but when they arrived, they found no one. There were clear signs that the place had been recently used, and in the yard, they found Hamid's body, shot in the head. But there was something else. In the barn behind the house, the police found evidence that someone had been held prisoner there recently. Cut ropes, a chair with struggle marks, and something that made Isabella's blood run cold. Women's clothing scattered on the floor. "He has a new victim," she told the captain. "Someone he's kidnapped. We'll check all missing persons reports from the last few days," the captain promised. But Isabella had a terrible feeling it was already too late. That night at the hotel in Essaouira, where she was staying under police protection, Isabella couldn't sleep. She kept looking at Sophie's necklace, which she now wore around her neck, and thinking about all the women whose faces she had seen in the photographs in the abandoned house. How many families were out there, like her own, who had never known? What had really happened to their daughters, sisters, friends? Around 2 in the morning, her phone rang. It was Captain Benkirain. "We found something," he said, his voice tight. A young French woman, Marie Dubois, was reported missing by her friends yesterday. She was traveling alone in Morocco and was last seen at a restaurant in Essaouira, having dinner with an older man. Where? That's what's strange. The restaurant's security cameras show her leaving with the man, but then we lose track. But there's more. We gained access to his hotel room, and we found a map with several locations marked. What kind of locations? Isolated houses, caves, places where someone could hide a person. Isabella, I think he's planning something big. It's not just one victim this time. Isabella felt her heart quicken. What do you mean? We also found a laptop in the room. Our tech expert was able to access it. There are emails, hundreds of them. He's in contact with other men from different countries. They're organizing something they call a special event. What kind of event? We're still trying to decipher it, but from the fragments we managed to read, it seems like some kind of auction. They're selling people. The horror of the situation washed over Isabella. Lucien wasn't just a serial killer. He was involved in an international human trafficking ring, and Marie Dubois wasn't just his next victim. She was merchandise. "We have to find her," Isabella said. "We're doing everything we can, but he knows this region very well and he has resources we can't track." "Isabella, you need to understand this isn't just about your sister anymore. This is much bigger." After she hung up the phone, Isabella stared out the window at the sleeping city. Somewhere out there, a young woman was being held captive, awaiting a fate that might be worse than death, and the man responsible was the same one who had destroyed Sophie's life. She thought of her sister, of how Sophie had tried to leave clues, had tried to warn others, even knowing she would likely die. Sophie had been brave in the end, braver than Isabella had been all those years, simply accepting the disappearance as an inexplicable tragedy. But now she had a chance to do something Sophie never could: save a life. Isabella grabbed her phone and called Captain Benkerain. "I want to help with the search," she said. "Isabella, you're not a police officer. It's too dangerous. I know this man better than any of you. I've studied him for 19 years. I know how he thinks, how he operates. You need me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "There's something I haven't told you," the captain finally said. "One of the locations marked on the map is a place we know. An old cave under some Roman ruins, about 30 miles from here. It's isolated, hard to find, but it has an exit to the sea. It would be the perfect place to transport someone. Let's go. I can't allow a civilian—" "Captain," Isabella interrupted, "if you don't take me, I'll go alone. I have a rental car and a GPS. I can find the place." Another pause. "All right. But you stay in the car, understood? Don't approach until we know it's safe." An hour later, Isabella was in the back of a police car, driving through the moonlit Moroccan landscape. There were 2 other cars with them, each carrying armed officers. Captain Benkerain had decided to take the operation seriously. "Tell me more about this man," he asked as they drove. "How does he choose his victims?" Isabella thought of the photographs she'd seen in the abandoned house. "He looks for women who are alone, usually traveling. Young, beautiful women who seem to be looking for adventure. He seduces them, makes them feel special, unique. Then he takes them to isolated places and kills them. Before, yes, but now it seems he's found a way to monetize his victims. Do you think your sister suffered?" The question hit Isabella like a punch. It was something she'd wondered thousands of times over the years, but had never been able to answer. "I hope not," she whispered. "I hope she died quickly before he could do other things to her." The Roman ruins loomed ahead like stone ghosts against the starry sky. They were the remnants of an ancient city with broken columns and crumbling walls that cast strange shadows under the moonlight. The place had an aura of desolation that made Isabella shiver. "The cave is over there," the captain said, pointing to an area where the ruins met a small cliff that sloped down towards the sea. They parked a safe distance away and approached on foot. Isabella could hear the sound of waves crashing against the rocks below, a steady, hypnotic rhythm that contrasted with the tense silence of the operation. It was when they were about 100 yards from the ruins that they saw the light, a faint light but unmistakable, coming from somewhere below ground level. The cave. The captain signaled for his men to take positions. Isabella stayed back, as promised, but even from a distance, she could feel her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone around could hear it. 2 officers carefully descended towards the cave entrance. Isabella watched them disappear into the darkness, and then there was a long silence that seemed to last an eternity. Finally, one of the officers emerged from the cave entrance and nodded to the captain. They had found something. "Stay here," the captain told Isabella, but she was determined to see for herself what was in the cave. She followed him to the entrance, a narrow opening in the rocks leading to a descending tunnel. The smell coming from inside was awful, a mixture of dampness, mildew, and something else. Something she didn't want to identify. The cavern opened into a larger chamber lit by several battery-powered lanterns, and it was there that Isabella saw something that made her tremble with horror and rage. Marie Dubois was tied to a chair in the center of the cavern, unconscious but apparently alive. But she wasn't alone. There were other women there, some tied up, others in makeshift cages made of metal bars. Isabella quickly counted 6 women, all young, all in varying states of terror and exhaustion. "My God," the captain whispered, "how many?" 6, Isabella said, her voice almost inaudible. "He has 6 women here." That's when they heard footsteps coming from deeper in the cavern. The captain drew his weapon and signaled for his men to take positions. Lucien Moreau emerged from the darkness like a well-dressed ghost. He didn't seem surprised to see them there. In fact, he seemed almost amused. "Ah, Isabella," he said, as if greeting an old friend. "I expected you to come. After all, you're just like your sister, too stubborn for your own good." "Release these women," the captain ordered, pointing his gun at Lucien. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Captain. You see, these women are quite valuable. I have buyers waiting for them in several countries. It would be very bad for business to simply let them go." "You're surrounded. There's no way out," Lucien smiled. "Ah, but there's always a way out, Captain, especially when you have influential friends." That's when Isabella heard the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to see more armed men entering the cavern, but these weren't police officers. They were hard-looking men, clearly criminals. "I'm afraid the cavalry arrived a little late," Lucien said. "My associates were expecting you." The captain tried to use his radio, but he couldn't get a signal in the cavern. They were trapped. "Now," Lucien continued, "we have a few options. I could simply kill you all here and now, which would be practical but a little wasteful. Or I could find a way to make you useful." His eyes fixed on Isabella. "You, my dear, would be an excellent addition to my collection. After all, you have the Martinez family beauty, and that stubbornness I so admire." "Go to hell," Isabella spat. Lucien laughed. "Ah, but I'm already in hell, my dear. And now you are too." It was then that one of the women in the cages, who had been quiet until then, lifted her head. She was older than the others, with dark hair and copper skin. When she spoke, it was with a voice that Isabella recognized. Immediately, even after 19 years, "Dora." The world stopped. Isabella felt her legs grow weak, and for a moment she thought she would faint. The woman in the cage, worn down by time and suffering but unmistakably familiar, was Sophie. "Sophie?" Isabella whispered, her voice breaking. "Ah, what a touching reunion," Lucien said, clapping slowly. "Yes, Isabella, your dear sister, is alive, or rather, was alive, until now." Sophie tried to stand, grasping the bars of the cage. "Dora, you shouldn't have come. He was waiting for you." "Very perceptive, Sophie," Lucien said. "You see, my dear Isabella, I never killed your sister. She was too special for that. So I kept her for all these years. She's been a very useful companion, and an excellent way to ensure that other women cooperate." "You're a monster," Isabella said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm a businessman. And now, finally, I have both Martinez sisters. This will be worth a lot of money." Captain Benkerain made a sudden move, trying to disarm one of Lucien's men, but he was quickly subdued. The other officers were also disarmed and forced to kneel. "Now," Lucien said, "let's do this the civilized way. Isabella, you're going into that cage next to your sister, and you'll all wait calmly while I arrange transportation." "No," Isabella said, but her voice was trembling. "Oh, but I insist. You see, if you don't cooperate, I'll start killing these other women one by one, starting with that young French girl there." He pointed to Marie Dubois, who was beginning to regain consciousness. "You have 10 seconds to decide." Isabella looked at Sophie, who was shaking her head, trying to tell her not to do it, but she couldn't let other women die for her sake. "All right," she said finally, "but first, tell me something. Why did you do this to Sophie? Why didn't you kill her like the others?" Lucien smiled. "Because she was special. She challenged me in a way the others never did. Even when I tried to break her, she maintained a spark of rebellion that I found intoxicating. And you raped her. I possessed her. There's a difference." The rage that exploded in Isabella's chest was unlike anything she had ever felt. It was pure, burning rage, fueled by 19 years of pain and loss. "You destroyed our lives," she said, taking a step toward him. "I created a better life for her, without the pressures and expectations of the modern world. You turned her into your slave. I turned her into my masterpiece. That's when Isabella saw the opportunity. One of Lucien's men had lowered his weapon slightly, distracted by the conversation, and there was a heavy lantern near his feet. In a swift move, she grabbed the lantern and hurled it at the nearest man's head. He fell, dazed, and his weapon slid across the cavern floor. Chaos erupted. The police officers took advantage of the distraction to try and disarm the other men. Gunshots echoed through the cavern, ricocheting off the stone walls. Isabella ran towards the cage where Sophie was imprisoned, trying to find a way to open it. "The key!" Sophie yelled over the din. "He keeps it in his pocket." Isabella turned to see Lucien grappling with Captain Benkerain. The two men were rolling on the ground, each trying to get to the gun that had fallen between them. Without thinking, Isabella ran towards the fight. She grabbed the gun before either man could reach it and pointed it at Lucien. "Stop!" she shouted. Lucien stopped struggling and raised his hands, but there was a smile on his face. "You won't kill me, Isabella. You're not a killer." "You're right," she said. "I'm not a killer, but I'm a survivor, and I'm not going to let you hurt anyone else." She shot, but not to kill. The bullet hit Lucien's leg, and he fell, screaming in pain. "The key," she demanded, pointing the gun at his head, his face contorted with pain. Lucien pulled a small key from his pocket and tossed it to the ground. Isabella snatched it up and ran to free Sophie. As the cage door swung open, the two sisters embraced with a force that seemed to try to make up for all the lost years. Sophie was too thin, bearing the marks of old injuries, but she was alive. "I knew you'd come," Sophie whispered. "I always knew." "I never stopped looking," Isabella replied, tears streaming down her face. "Never." Around them, the police were gaining control of the situation. Lucien's men were being arrested, and the other women were being freed. Marie Dubois was awake and seemingly unharmed, just frightened and confused. But when Isabella turned to look at Lucien, he had vanished. There was a small opening at the back of the cavern she hadn't noticed before, and a trail of blood led to it. "He escaped," Captain Benkerain said, panting, "but he can't get far with that injury." "He'll try to reach the sea," Sophie said, her voice still weak. "There's a hidden boat in a cove nearby. He showed me once, said it was his insurance policy." The captain radioed his teams, and within minutes helicopters could be heard overhead. But Isabella knew Lucien had a head start. He knew these waters, and he had 19 years of practice at disappearing. 2 hours later, after the women were taken to the hospital and Lucien was still not found, Isabella and Sophie sat in an ambulance, finally having a chance to really look at each other. "You're different," Sophie said, gently touching Isabella's face. "Older, stronger." 19 years changes a lot," Isabella replied. "I became a journalist, like you always said I should. I spent all those years investigating your disappearance. And I spent all those years trying to find a way to escape and get back home," Sophie said. "He moved me constantly. We never stayed in one place for more than a few months, but we always came back to Morocco eventually." "Why didn't he kill? You like the others?" Sophie hesitated. "Because I was pregnant." The world stopped for Isabella. "What?" "When he abducted me, I didn't know yet, but a few weeks later I found out. And when I told him, something changed. He became possessive in a different way. He said I was carrying his child, and that made me special." Where's the baby?" Tears streamed down Sophie's face. "I lost the baby in the 5th month, probably because of the stress, the drugs he gave me. But even after that, he didn't kill me. He said I was still fertile, that I could have other children." Isabella felt a wave of nausea. "He repeatedly raped you?" "Not only that. He used me to to make other women cooperate. He'd say that if they didn't do what he wanted, he'd hurt me. Izzy, I helped him destroy other women's lives. That wasn't your fault. You were a victim. But I could have tried to escape sooner. I could have... You survived, Isabella interrupted. You did what you needed to do to survive. And now you're free. They embraced again, but this time there was a deep sadness in the hug. They both knew that, though they were finally reunited, the scars of the past 19 years would never fully disappear. 3 days later, Lucien Moreau was found dead on a beach 30 miles away. He had bled to death, apparently trying to reach his boat. His body was identified through fingerprints, revealing he was wanted for similar crimes in at least 6 countries. The subsequent investigation uncovered an international human trafficking ring that spanned 3 continents. Dozens of men were arrested, including some in positions of power who had protected Lucien over the years. The other women found in the cavern were reunited with their families. Marie Dubois returned to France, traumatized but determined to help other victims. 2 of the women were from Eastern European countries and had been presumed dead by their families years earlier. For Isabella and Sophie, however, the journey was just beginning. Sophie needed extensive medical and psychological treatment. She had suffered not only physical and sexual abuse, but also years of psychological manipulation that had left her with trust issues and severe anxiety. Isabella took an indefinite leave from the newspaper to care for her sister. They rented a small house in a coastal town in Brazil, away from the media and the constant questions. Sophie needed time to readjust to the world, and Isabella needed time to process everything she had uncovered. 6 months later, as they walked along the beach at sunset, Sophie finally opened up about some of the darker details of her captivity. She talked about the other women she'd seen come and go, about the buyers who would come to examine the merchandise, about the times Lucien had used her as an example to break the resistance of other victims. "I hate myself for being a part of it," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You did what you needed to do to survive," Isabella repeated, as she had so many times in the past few months. "You had no choice. But I could have died instead of cooperating. And then how many other women would he have killed? How many families would never have known what happened to their daughters? Sophie, you helped expose the whole operation. Your survival saved other lives." They stopped walking and stared out at the ocean. The waves gently lapped at the shore, the sound almost hypnotic. Sophie touched the necklace Isabella had returned to her, her grandmother's heirloom that had been kept as a trophy for so many years. "Sometimes I dream about him," Sophie admitted. "Even knowing he's dead, I still dream he's coming for me. That will fade with time. Do you think I'll ever have a normal life again?" Isabella looked at her sister, seeing not only the physical and emotional scars, but also the strength that had allowed her to survive what no person should ever have to endure. "Normal is overrated," she said finally, "but you'll have a life, a real life, full of choices that are yours, and I'll be here to help you every step of the way." Sophie smiled for the first time in months, a genuine smile that reminded Isabella of the sister she'd lost so many years ago. "Thank you," she whispered, "for never giving up on me." "I never would," Isabella replied. "We're sisters. That means no matter how far you go or for how long, I'll always find a way to bring you back home." They stood there on the beach until the stars appeared in the sky, 2 women who had survived the worst the world could offer and found strength in each other. The future was still uncertain, full of challenges and difficult moments, but for the first time in 19 years, they would face those challenges together. In Isabella's pocket, her phone buzzed. It was Marcus, her editor, asking if she was ready to write the story that would expose the entire trafficking ring, that would give names and faces to the victims, that would ensure that Hamid's sacrifice and the suffering of all those women would not be forgotten. She looked at Sophie, who nodded. "Yes," Isabella said into the phone, "I'm ready to tell the story, but it will be told our way, in our voices. And we won't stop until everyone responsible is punished and all the victims are remembered." And so, as the waves continued to crash on the beach, the Diaz sisters began to plan how they would turn their pain into purpose, their survival into justice, and their love for each other into a force that would change the world for the better. The echo of the tides carried away the secrets of the past, but also the promises of the future. And for the first time in a long time, that future seemed full of possibilities.